Yo, what it is, what it is. What's going down? All my people out there. I hope, at least a handful of people are tuning in by the time I actually publish this on YouTube. Um, but this is the my presentation on ancient Europe and its Australo Melanesian origins. Now, a certain type of people, or usually a certain type of people, will most likely have issue with this title. Probably, a lot of people are probably going to wonder why I chose such a title, but it's going to non-subjectively make sense. And so I prepared like some objectives, an overview is the better word for it, in terms of what type of information I'm going to go over. I'm going to be reading from a genomic study in this first part. It's going to be a part 2, and I'm going to explain what I'll be covering in part 2. But anyway, I just want to explain how I got to this point. This is a continuation from Kennewick Man, because Kennewick Man segued into this because I was curious. I wanted to know what were these population groups in Europe, in ancient Europe, that they were associating Kennewick Man, El Moran, and so forth with, and so that prompted me to backtrack, get some information. I actually stumbled across a 2023 genomic study, which is a lot more recent than that Kennewick Man study that I used to build the foundation of the black genomic presence in ancient America. And and so, as it is, this study that I'm about to read is actually in 2023, which is a much more I guess modern or newer study. For those who will try to say, well, it's outdated and now, this, that, and the other. Man, if you're really looking for these genomic studies, which I'm not going to say are easy to find, you're going to find out that there are new studies that are constantly coming out, basically suggesting the same thing and really building on top of each other. Now, I'm not going to say that every genomic study is going to come out right and say, that ancient America or ancient Europe was just outright black, like the Kennewick 2018 study did. But if you read between the lines, you read, the haplogroups, you read about the autosomal makeup of these people, so forth and so on. Especially populations that existed, well before the depigmentation alleles entered the genome, which is around about 23,000 years ago at the earliest. And even at that, it started off as a minority. So, I think you guys can understand where I'm going with that one. Because in this presentation here in part 1, this genomic study is covering populations that existed in ancient Europe prior to 40,000, at 40,000 years ago and earlier, or later, I should say. So these populations existed about 20,000 years prior to the existence or the entering of the depigmentation alleles into the human genome. And I think I'm eventually do a complete video on depigmentation alleles, when it entered, how it affected the human genome, because I think a lot of this stuff is taken for granted. It's not widely understood by the general public, and basically what I'm going to demonstrate is how foreign depigmentation was to the genome. and that's not an attack against you know pale or less melanated populations. I'm just going by the science and what it says. You know what I mean? But anyway, I want to get into the overview, and I'm gonna explain the overview, and then I'm gonna get into the article. And really, before I get into the genomic study, um, I'm gonna share some information in terms of how I came to this point, um, what it was originally inspired by, and we'll have some fun. I think you guys will laugh at this clip. But once again, it's a clip from when I got kicked off of Sean P's show. But it's very relevant. It's not just me trolling. It's very relevant to the topic, because that is really what really sparked this. Now, the Kennewick man study was an independently on his own, also contributed to it. But the first spark was from what I share, or at least what I was trying to share on Sean P's show. And of course, he kicked me off for trying to state that. But I'm gonna go ahead and get into this overview and explain where this is going. All right, so once again, ancient Europe and its Australo-Melanesian origins. Objectives. I'm going to demonstrate non-subjectively through evidence of uniparental markers, especially YDNA, because we know the YDNA is the most telling about population, turnover, because, logically speaking, when you're thinking about history and how history normally plays itself out, the women normally do not get killed off; they remain behind. And they become the subjects of the incoming males that are conquering the older population. So to get a good idea of what a prior population looked like, YDNA is probably the better type of DNA to look at. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go through all of these populations that are starting around about 45,000, 43,000 years ago. They mention a lot of Pacific populations in this study, and I'm going to go one by one, and I'm going to use AI to basically extract what type of YDNA they had. And you're going to understand non-subjectively why I titled this like I titled it. All right. Kennewick man received his Austro-Melanesian genotypes from West Eurasia, not Oceania. I'm going to explain that. Demonstrate through evidence of YDNA that Australo-Melanesians were the first inhabitants of the Levant. Hopefully I'll be able to get to that. Anything that I don't get to, because, the Levant, part of this study is really going to come in, later. But if I have time to get that in, I'm going to get it in. And then lastly, how Southeast Asians and Oceanic populations are partially ancestral to West Africans, and by what mechanisms were Denisovan and Neanderthal variants delivered into West Africa. Like I said, man, I'll probably spend a lot of time with this genomic study. If I can get to these 2 points in this first part, I will. If not, I'll have to push it back into part 2, and then it might be a 3-part series, total. So, I'll see where I'm at with the time. But I think overall, man, this is going to be very interesting, man. And I think a lot of his, whoever actually tunes in, I think his will be rolling, and it'll be satisfying to the other side. And what I mean by the other side is those who already know that ancient Europe was a melanated population, and not just melanated, their morphology, as I can show you here. I'm gonna take this off. screen. Take this off the screen. And I'm sure I finally got my chat GPT working. Wow. It just decided to work on its own, man. Maybe it's just that time. I wanted to share something here. Let's see if I can refresh this screen. Yeah, here we go. Okay, let me share this so y'all can see what I'm looking at. So you guys just don't get left in the dark. Okay, here it is. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back up to the conversation that I was already having. This last part of the conversation here, and a lot of the backdrop information is going to come from this thread that I started with ChatGPT just to confirm evidence and cross verify whatever that wording may be. I think you guys get the gist of it. But let me take it up to the top. Let me make sure that this is definitely on the screen. And thank God I looked at that. Now it's on the screen. Okay. Let me go back where I was. Okay, so what I asked was, what was the morphology of European remains 65,000 years ago? The reason why I said Europe 65,000 years ago was because of the affinity that Kennewick man shared with Mesozoica, which was a 65,000-year-old specimen. Even though that was more of a Eurasian, it wasn't, the extreme west of the continental landmass that you would call Europe. I think that was more interior between Europe and Asia, so you will call that Eurasia. So it responds by saying that the evidence for those specimens are slim because not much was collected, but it still goes on to answer what was in Europe between 45 and 40,000 years ago. And it says here that the earliest modern Europeans, such as those associated with the sites like Pastura Coase and Baco Cairo Cave, generally show long, relatively low crania, broad faces compared with many later Europeans, robust skeletons, prominent brow ridges, though less pronounced than Neanderthals, strong muscle attachments, and a mixture of anatomically modern and, in some individuals, retain archaic traits due to recent Neanderthal ancestry. These individuals do not look identical to later Mesolithic or modern Europeans. So I just wanted to establish that. I go on to ask a more specific question, which was partially already answered in the above there. But here it goes on to say in further detail too, the body type, robust bodies. That robust body type seems to be something that was prevalent throughout ancient human beings. The ancient remains found in the earth mounds, same thing. Robust bodies, bones, extremely dense, uh, so forth and so on. Relatively large cranial capacity, generalized modern human cranial morphology, ancestral pigmentation. Yes, this is important. Um, and It says that derived depigmentation alleles had not yet become common, and no expectation they resembled modern Northern Europeans in overall phenotype. One thing your recent questions have highlighted: you've been connecting three lines of evidence: MtDNA C in early Eurasia, upper Paleolithic morphology, ancient genomic population structure. So this is kind of gave it away, man. I don't know, I might clip that out, so that won't be such a giveaway. But anyway, I go on to ask, were they brachy or dicephalic in cranial morphology? It says if you're referring to the earliest upper Paleolithic modern humans in Europe, the general pattern reported by physical anthropologists is that they were predominantly dilachocephalic, is the proper terminology, which is long-headed rather than brachycephalic. Why is this important? Because anybody that really, studies anthropology and genomic studies, you know that the di the licho the dolichocephalic long-headed type is associated with Negro types. The brachycephalic type is more associated with the more modern population groups, like those derived from modern Europeans, East Asians, and so forth and so on, with some types fitting into the mesocephalic, just like it says here for the Gravidians here. But this table is going to demonstrate that the majority of these populations, even up into the Mesolithic West hunter-gathering population group, which is where Cheddar Man comes from, is that West. He descends from that West hunter-gatherer population. They were dolichocephalic. So Europe in ancient times is pretty much dolichocephalic across the board. They're long-headed and they are very melanated because prior to 23,000 years ago, depigmentation did not exist in the genome. So I just wanted to establish that. Now let me go back to the PowerPoint and I'm gonna get that back on the screen, and I'm gonna make sure that I go over everything on that overview. So I'm gonna bring that back up. Okay, we covered everything there. Okay, so in part one, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start off with this Sean P video when he kicked me off because I was stating facts and he just couldn't deal with it. At least that's in my opinion. Do that. Relevant population groups from the 2018 study. I think that's already included in this PowerPoint. Reading of the genomic study, paleogenomics of the upper Paleolithic to Neolithic European hunter-gatherers, is everything that I'm gonna cover in part one. So yeah. So I already established that I wasn't gonna cover everything in that objective in this part one. So this is what I'm gonna cover in part one. So what inspired this presentation, the debate with Sean P, and the Kennewick Man conclusions? Relevant population groups from the 2018 study is the Mesmaiskaya 1, the Vestanese population, the Elmoran, the Labrana, Salutrian populations, and the Magdalenian Magdalenian population. Did the best I could there. All right. So yeah, that's what we're gonna cover in part 2. We just gonna get into it now. You know what I mean? I was trying to take my time and really prepare this to try to make it perfect, but sometimes, man, you just gotta get into it, man. You just gotta do it. Like Nike. Just gotta do it. And that's the point where I'm at. I'm like, I'm not gonna let me actually put this on the screen and actually go through it. um yeah, let me get that PowerPoint back up. My bad, yeah. Yeah, let's go back up to the top. Okay. So this is what I'm covering in part 1. What inspired this presentation? Relevant population groups from 2018, from the 2018 study. Reading of the genomic study, paleogenomics of the upper Paleolithic to Neolithic European hunter-gatherers. What inspired the presentation? The debate with Sean P. and the Kennewick-Man conclusions, and the relevant population groups from the 2018 study, which is that same Kennewick-Man study. And that was actually the preprint for 2017, but it was actually published in 2018. The relevant populations include the Mesmai, Sakaya, 1, the Vestanese, the Elmoran, the Villabrana, Salutrian population, and the Magdalenian population. This is what part 2 is going to cover there. Okay. And that's it. And that. So I'm going to remove this and I'm going to share this clip from me on Sean P's show. I think I already have the time where it needs to be to pick up where it needs to be picked up at. And let me make sure this is on the screen. Almost made that mistake again. Gee whiz, man. I'm glad I'm checking it though. But anyway, yeah, I'm gonna let you guys hear this. I'm gonna pause that music, man. We don't need that music in the background while this is playing. Yeah. So let you guys hear this. This is kind of funny, man. It's hilarious.
The fame about the Negro. Hold up. What the fuck did that say?
You said that there was an oceanic presence.
We need to debate right now. We need to debate the origins of the Negro in America. Soon as man leave my house, bro. And he could be gone in another 15 minutes, bro. Hopefully. He been here for about 30 minutes. I'm gonna have to pay him, and then our friend Claire, I gotta get 2 things, which I can get in the, you know what I mean? But and then you said what happened to them? Who was them that you're talking about? The Australasians? What do you mean? What happened to them?
Real simple.
Hold on. Hey, what you mean? What happened to them?
So he's asking me a question in the chat, just in case, the context is, let me ask you about this. Just in case, you guys don't understand the context. I was in the chat first and then he brought me on live, which you're going to see. Now, this window in the bottom right-hand corner here is me on my own YouTube channel giving a response to this whole segment that he did, because his whole segment, if I'm not mistaken, is a response to one of the videos that I did. So I did a rebuttal to this, especially after he kicked me off like that. And so yeah, that's the backdrop to that. And so I'm gonna let it spin. I'm gonna let it play. And then once more, I'm gonna check and make sure it's on the screen. I'm good there. And yeah, I'm gonna let it play.
You can unmute, bro. You can be heard. Oh, thank
Yeah,
you.
can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, what happened to him?
What you mean? What happened to him?
It's a straightforward question.
No, it's not.
What happened to him?
Historically, what happened to who?
Yeah, so obviously I'm on right now. So yeah, he already defensive. Looking back on it, to be fair, unless there was some other context to it, that is kind of like an open-ended question. You know what I mean? So I'll give him that. You know, because I can't remember this entire sequence. So I don't know how we got to that topic. Oh, because we were talking about whether or not Austro-Melanesians were whether they can be considered Negroes, which to me is very obvious that they have to be. But anyway, his position is that they're not. My position is that it is, and hopefully this part picked up on enough of this sequence, and so you guys can understand exactly how this conversation went in the direction that it did. But let me play it and make sure.
Historically,
the Austronesians that you're talking about in South America.
What Australasians in South America?
You said that there was an oceanic presence in indigenous American and South America, correct?
No, you're going back to a source that what I was reading from on that video.
Yeah. I mean, what did you say? I mean,
the Oceania, that's an old ass video. The Oceania presence isn't referring to the Australasians.
What's it referring to?
It ain't referring to them. It ain't referring to Papua New Guineans. It ain't referring to nobody we don't have a genetic presence for.
So how like this, what he was reading from, and just like many other genomic studies, highlighting this Australian signal in the Americas, it's a genetic signal that's related to Australian populations, Austronesian populations. So right now we're talking about ancient America and particularly South America, and he's saying that doesn't mean that it's the same signal, that is associated with Australo-Melanesians. But when these genomists say Australian, that's exactly what they mean, because they have sequenced DNA, and particularly autosomally, where they found an Australian signal. No other population is associated with associated with an Australian signal, except for Australo-Melanesians. You know what I mean? And unless I think he goes on to try to say that this is a signal that's associated, maybe they, I guess he's trying to say maybe that they add mix down the line, and that group, that admixture, is what they're talking about. But in that study, and I'm not going to go deep into it, the reason why that is incorrect is because the studies establish that it's only found in South America. It's not found anywhere upstream. So if we're going to say that it's just some Native Americans, or of the Native American type that brought that into South America, then just like the genomics said, we should expect to see that upstream. And they specifically said that they didn't. They only found this in these populations in South America. So that's the reason why Sean P is incorrect on that. He might not agree with that, but that's just what it is. So anyway, let's keep it playing. Let's keep it pushing.
So
are you trying to no, hold on. Let me try to understand. Are you trying to make them black?
Yeah, Sean.
Is that what you're saying the black presence is? Stop.
Nah, I'm trying to understand, is that what you're saying? So you saying that
No.
that's not a black, that's not the same. Okay, so
No,
how do you
those
make
are not
that,
black
how do you
people.
make that inference?
Because they're not black
How do you
people.
make that inference?
Because they're not
Based
black.
on what?
The definition of
Based on
black.
what?
They're not black people.
I'm saying, where you get what source is saying that they're not black?
They're not black people.
How do you know that?
Because based on the definition of black, they're not black people.
What's
You
the
just
definition
said
of black?
you just called them something. So they're not black people.
What's the definition of black?
People of sub-Saharan Africa.
Wrong.
Descendants
No.
of sub-Saharan Africa. People from sub-Saharan Africa.
Sub-Saharan Africa.
In America, that's the definition.
Now, sub-Saharan is a type. And, you know, that's a type that's often and only associated with Africa. And that's where he's going with it. You know, he thinks because our lineage is associated with sub-Saharans, you know, which the E1B1A is in Africa. It's definitely in Africa. But the mode of migration, the migrational patterns to Africa cannot be, you know, cannot be pinpointed. You know what I mean? So to say just because a lineage is associated in Africa today doesn't mean that lineage originated in Africa. And we're gonna this demonstration that I'm doing is going to demonstrate once again multi-directional gene flow back and forth. And I'm assuming that these ancient populations had to have they had to be seafaring, you know, to be able to move this quickly. And what it seems like is that with the amount of land mass that they were covering back and forth, it seems like this was like some type of ancient, you know, like massive community, because it's only, you're gonna see, it's only a handful of haplogroups, you know, from the same superclade, which I'm gonna explain when I get into it. You can only assume that this is the same peoples. Now that doesn't mean that every single people within these peoples look identical or anything like that. That's not what I'm saying. But at a macro level, these people are moving in unison around the world. But anyway, I'll get to that in more detail. I just want to get to the part of that what really sparked this.
You want me to bring it up?
Sub-Saharan Africa is defined by the variants that are found in that region.
No.
Yes.
So per
Yes, it is.
the eight.
When we are proxy,
hold on before you get there, because you don't be knowing what the fuck you be talking about, bro. You're not a population geneticist, so I'm not gonna let you do it. I ain't gonna let you do.
I mean, it's just straight facts. So
no, it's not straight facts.
When we're proxied against West Africans,
it's not straight facts,
you can look
bro.
it up, bro.
It's not.
Now you can see he cut me off. Yeah, you want to do that, Sean? Yeah, buddy.
It's not straight facts. You asked me about Austronese. You're not asking me about. You just add. You confusing. That's what I mean. So that's what I'm. Everything's about knowledge in the place. No, I'm not cutting you off. I'm not cutting you off. You can't ask me a question and then I answered, and then you say, no, this is based on this, based on this.
You didn't answer the question.
I did.
Okay, go ahead. Okay, shoot your shot.
Did you not hear the answer? Or did you not hear what you wanted to hear?
Give your answer one more time. What is black defined as?
People of African descent.
No.
Okay, and who defined that?
The white people did when they were taking our asses from where they took us from.
So,
man.
Based on the out of Africa.
This man said the white people defined it. And this man probably said it with a straight face. He's fine with that. He's fine with somebody else defining us. And this guy, whatever, man. Let's keep it pushing.
Now you're dealing with something. So you're dealing with two different things.
That's fine. That's fine.
No, it's not fine, because as soon as you say out of Africa, don't mean nothing. Are Australasians African?
Came out of Africa and
are Australasians African?
So what he was cutting me off is the point that people like him believe in the out of Africa theory, which means that everybody at one point came out of Africa. The out of Africa migration happened, according to the theory, around about between 65 to 70,000 years ago. Now, the progenitor to Austro-Melanesians is the CF superclade, which was out of Africa. Actually, it only really had, depending on what source you're looking at, they were out of Africa before out of Africa, if that makes sense, man. And I'm gonna try to find that. I'm gonna try to find the article, and maybe present it in the second part, because I don't want to take up too much time looking for it. But there's an article that says that there is fossil evidence of an Austro-Melanesian presence in Australia. I think the number was either 70 to 75,000 years ago, which defies the out of Africa migration, because they have it at, the current model has it between 65 and 70,000 years. I believe that is. So I think some models might have it at 80,000. Even at 80,000, you're only talking about 5,000 years to give these Austro-Melanesians to get to, really the progenitor has to be in Australia or Southeast Asia in time to split into the CF. And then the C haplogroup has to be in Australia, all within 5,000 years, which is pushing it very, very tight. You know what I mean? And this demonstration is going to be another demonstration to demonstrate how all of the gene flow is coming from the east of Africa, outside of Africa, more so than any gene flow coming out of Africa itself. And so, like I said, these Austro-Melanesians were in Australia actually around about 70,000 years ago, which is much earlier than the out of Africa theory originally suggested. But anyway, let's shine, babble some more. Let's go.
No, they're not African. That's
all right. So why are you? So when I said that they are not black,
that's your definition, bro.
No, that's not my definition.
Black is not surrounded
that's
by
no, that's not my bro. Listen to me. Do we have the same shared experience with them?
You said that.
No, I actually listen to my question. Listen to my question. Do we have the same shared experience as Australasians or the Australians?
How's that relevant, man?
It's very relevant, because black people in America, because black people, what defines a black people, listen to me, man. Listen so you can understand the relevance. Because black people in America have a shared experience.
We ain't talking about experiences.
No.
That wasn't the question.
You ain't understanding what I'm saying, bro.
Because we don't share the experience that was.
They are not considered black James. They're not considered black James. That's the short, skinny answer. They're not considered black. Buddy. That's not my opinion. That's not my opinion. Because the people that are considered black have a shared experience in the Americas. Phenotypically, they are not black. They ain't black.
Phenotypically, who do they share the most affinities with?
They're not black.
They're not black.
They're not black. You're talking skin color. You're talking skin. You're talking skin color now.
No, we're not, Sean. We're talking about overall phenotypes. We're talking about cranial morphology, dental morphology, facial morphology, hair type. And see, hair type is overlooked, as that's often taken for granted. But hair type is dictated by many loci. It's deeply hereditary. So someone with woolly hair is a dead giveaway in terms of what type of ancestry that they descend from. You know what I mean? They may carry genomes that are not African because they've been in You know what I'm saying? And I'm not endorsing out of Africa. You know what I'm saying? But they're not gonna carry any type of African genotype. You know, if they've been in Australia and Southeast Asia and really more Oceania for Austro-Melanesians, they've been in that area for that long, and seeing as that, you know, that Kennewick Man study established, you know, how they carry out their methods, which is, you know, the most significant SNPs that they observed are fast evolving SNPs, which are fast evolving mutations that reach saturation mutation very quickly. That's going to convolute any type of African genome associated with these Australo-Melanesians. And when I say African genomes, I don't believe that that means that, you know, everyone that carries these African genomes are actually from Africa. It is simply a genotype that is associated with Africa because Africa is, you know, used more so as the proxies for these studies than, you know, so-called African Americans, and I believe that's by design in these institutions because they do not want the truth to be told about so-called African Americans or Black American genomes because it would overthrow their whole model. But anyway, when you see wording like African like genomes and so forth and so on, just know it's a type. You know what I mean? And so fast SNPs are going to reflect the land mass that that, you know, these populations are currently on, not necessarily their deepest ancestral roots. And I'm pretty sure if you know, the slow acting SNPs were assessed deeper, you're going to find many correlations with so-called African genomes. But you know, I don't want to keep going on about that. I want to play this out and get to that genome study.
You're talking skin color. That don't mean anything because we can go to the South India near the equator where those people are clearly Indians. I'm not talking about nowhere. I'm talking in the Middle East. Those Indians, super black.
Tell us something.
But they ain't us. They ain't us.
You know why they ain't us? You know why they ain't us?
Why they ain't us?
Because they interbred with Indo-Europeans.
What do you think the Australasians interbred with, bro? What do you think?
They integrate with Neanderthals. That's different.
No. Neanderthal and what else?
That's it.
Don't stop. Neanderthals and what else? What else?
Oh, you want to talk about you want to talk about when the Europeans came?
No,
I'm talking about
they both Neanderthal and Denisovan and them saying.
So you can see here that his understanding is that Neanderthals and Denisovans are ancient white people. You know what I'm saying? He, you know, based on what he's saying here, he thinks that Neanderthals and Denisovans are similar to Europeans, because my rebuttal was that these East Indians are different because they admixed. Their ancestry consists of what you would call what, you know, the current model calls African Negroic people, plus an integration with European steppe populations to produce what we know today as East Indians. And so his rebuttal was that these oceanic populations integrate with and admix with these Neanderthals and Denisovans, which is absolutely correct. But his assumption or his understanding is that these Neanderthals and Denisovans were ancient white people, which is incorrect. They are ancient archaic Negroes. And a lot of people, you know, are slow to come into that understanding. They're still stuck on, you know, what is circulated on the internet calling, you know, modern white people Neanderthals and Denisovans. Neanderthals and Denisovans existed well before contemporary, you know, modern, what you would call white people, even though that doesn't mean that an archaic like type of white person couldn't existed back then, but that's just simply not the case because anatomically they share more affinity with what you would call modern Negroic populations. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that's a misconception and a hang up for a lot of, so-called black people, because they have been programmed to believe that these Neanderthals and Denisovans were anything but African archaic people. And as a matter of fact, in that Kennewick Man series, that's what the authors or the genomicists were calling, that type of genome. They were calling it African archaic. So anyway, man, let's keep it moving.
And those Europeans that you're talking about, people had to migrate through that gap in order to run into all of that.
Nah, Sean. What I'm saying, and this is what you don't understand. This is what you don't understand.
What you mean?
Let me finish what I'm saying. Let me finish what I'm saying.
Go ahead.
So you have all modern human populations are somewhat derived, but others are more derived than others. The Negro population is the least derived population group amongst any population group.
So who?
What you're trying to conflate, Sean?
No. The who? I said the who population? What would be considered the Negro population?
The Negro population.
No, who? What would be considered?
I just said it. Maybe I'll say it again. I don't know. I'm gonna let it play.
The Negro population.
Can I answer the question? It's any lineage. It's the lineages that retain the oldest sustained lineages since the first human beings.
One more time. Who is the Negro? No, because Negro wasn't even around. Negro wasn't around.
Lineages would fit that description.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
Right. No. So I want to bring you my example right here to further my point. And let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I'm gonna pull it up off my Gmail. So I had ChatGPT build me a Melanesian summary, and I'm gonna bring it up here and put it on the screen. I'm gonna stop sharing, and then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna share it on the screen, because here is exactly what I'm talking about. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna stop sharing this, and I want to bring up my own personal definition based on what I've been studying of what a Negro is. And anybody is welcome to argue this. It don't matter to me, because I know what I'm talking about. And when you actually study genetic data, it's gonna match up with what I'm talking about. Where's my PowerPoint at, man? This feed was on YouTube Live, man, so that's why it's so grainy. But anyway, the information is what's most important. There you go. I need to close one of those. I'm gonna fast forward a little bit. Oh, we can see it. Okay, where not early Homo sapien over early Homo sapien the populations last.
Why? They don't have a white. No. They have European. So they have admixture there.
Okay, where not early the populations last. And
why? They don't have a white. No. They have European. So they have admixture there.
Yeah, so he's trying to say that the European admixture changed the Negro structure, or what some people call sub-Saharan structure, which is false. The structure did not change. You know what I'm saying? Well, what I'm talking about is archetype. You know what I mean? And I've showed this guy studies where they've isolated the African component, and even after isolation, African Americans show a different archetype in their African portions of their ancestry than that of Africans. So no, Sean, you keep circling the same, misunderstanding, in that you think that admixture, recent admixture, changes the whole archetype of ancestral autosomal makeup, and it just doesn't, John. But I'm gonna continue because he about to kick me off.
Okay. All right, so to go back to your argument, I know what you're trying to do, bro. You're trying to do the hyper diffusionist game where you're trying to make everybody black. Oh, black people populated.
Yeah, he don't realize that his out of Africa idea that everybody has to be, anything black has to be out of Africa, and that's the fusionary. You know what I'm saying? Like, to make it clear, my point of view or my belief is that Negroes are like trees. Anywhere you go, any landmass you find, you're going to find Negroes, especially in ancient times. They're going to be in different varieties, just like you're going to find different varieties of trees on different land masses. Is what you would call autochthonous. I think I'm saying that correctly. You know what I mean? But no, I don't believe that all Negroes are from Africa. You know what I'm saying? So, but anyway, let me keep it going.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. I already ended the conversation when I told you that the Australasians are not black. They're not Negro. They're not Negro. They're not Negro. They're not. We don't have the same shared experience, and they're not us.
Experiences.
You didn't know. No, because bro, tell me what black person in America, hold on, let me ask you a question and see if you can answer it. What black person in America has the Denisovan and Neanderthal DNA in them? It's 50 million.
I can't answer the question for every black person, my guy.
Okay. Do you have a percentage
on
of
average,
50 million?
On average, African Americans carry little to none.
Okay. Are you talking Neanderthal or are you talking about both archaic humans?
I'm talking about any archaic hominin group outside of the West African.
All right, hold on, pause.
Population group that they're talking about.
Hold on, pause.
West Africa.
Hold on, pause it. I'm trying to make a point here. So when you brought up the Australasians and you brought the Australese to our front doorsteps, they carry both Neanderthal and Denisovan admixture components that are present. We are not them. So when you say that, what about this group of people? What happened to them? They are.
All right, I'm about to snatch the rug from underneath him. He don't realize he just walked into a trap, but I'm about to get him, or at least try to. And then while I'm getting him, he kicks me off. But anyway, let it play.
Not us, because genetically speaking, they possess.
Sean, you just contradict yourself, Sean.
Yo, bro, listen? They carry.
Sean, do you realize that?
Ask me about some people who carry archaic
DNA, buddy.
They carry both Denisovan and Neanderthal. No, we don't. Show me a West African with Denisovan. Show me the West Africans that carry Denisovan DNA.
Right now. That's why I told you when to debate. I told
you can't find one single West African that has Denisovan.
I got your messenger. I got your messenger.
Not one. You can't show me because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It doesn't.
There's been reports.
It doesn't exist.
Show that West
we never saw Denisovan. We never saw the Novusons,
Yeah,
bro.
buddy. You
We
can
never
try to
saw the
overtalk me all
Novusons.
you want, buddy.
We never saw.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. God, the fuck Lee, bro. Like,
Yeah, Sean, I'm about to give it to you right here, buddy. The what you duck, you can't hide from, champ. It's late, bro. It's 11:15, but I gotta finish giving you the business, man. It must be done. It must be done. This is crazy, but it's gotta be done, bro. You cannot get away with that, bro. No, it's not happening. It is not happening. Where is it at? Let's see. Be over here. Fast forward it, man. Okay. Given the rich human and hominin history in Africa, the lineage leading to the modern day humans has the potential to interact and also mix with hominin groups that separated from our lineage far back in time, perhaps on par with the divergence of Neanderthals and Denisovans some 600,000 years ago. It is also likely that distinct modern human groups existed, possibly divergent a few 100,000 years ago or more recently, that later uh, disappeared for some reason. Such populations could have mixed with human groups that did contribute substantially to today's people in Africa. We can refer to the latter phenomena as integration from ghost populations, and the former case as archaic integration. One way to separate these two integration processes is to define archaic integration as involving a hominid group separated from the human lineage before the deepest divergence among modern humans some 300,000 years ago, and ghost integration involving instinct anatomically modern groups that separated around 300,000 years ago or more recently. Since the publication of the Neanderthal genome, the Neanderthal admixture into human populations is continuously being unraveled, which also has bearing on the understanding of the demographic history of African populations. The West African Yoruba have often been used as an unadmixed reference population to estimate global Neanderthal admixture proportions. Although they have been shown to carry small levels of Neanderthal ancestry, a new method that eliminates the need for an unadmixed modern source showed that the Neanderthal ancestry proportion in Africans was larger than previously thought. Um, Chan et al. Found on average 17 MBs of individual, of which 94% is shared with non-Africans. Strom et al. Also found archaic variants from Neanderthal and Denisovans in West Africans that are absent in non-Africans, reflecting the larger genetic variation found in Africa. The Neanderthal ancestry in modern Africans can be explained by back migration from ancestral European-like source into Africa, a scenario which supported by other studies that found Neanderthal ancestry proportions to correlate with Eurasian ancestry proportions. And that is Sean's nail in the coffin. Yeah, so that also points out another thing too, that these West Africans were carrying rare variants of Neanderthal and Denisovans, is what that article said. Um, and I'm gonna get, I'm gonna stop sharing here so I can bring up a better visual than what's on the screen right now. Let me get something else on the screen. I'm gonna get the actual article where that was coming from. Let's see if I got it up already. And if I don't, I'm gonna put it on there. Let's see. Okay, I don't see it up here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go get it out of my folder. I'm gonna get it out of my folder and I'm gonna bring it back on the screen. Okay, let me get it on the screen now. Make sure to share it. And I'm zooming in even more. Make sure that this is seen. Get rid of this. Okay. So I read it. You can see it clearly on the screen there. And so this Eurasian population that they're saying back migrated into Africa. Notice they're using the word back migration. I don't think that, there's any information available to really determine for sure whether that was a back migration, because what they're trying to say is it came out of Africa and then went back into Africa, and I'm not too sure about that one. I think that's one of the, out of Africa hijackings, you know what I mean? And that's my position for right now. If I come across any information that suggests otherwise, I'll be sure to, to be honest about it and correct myself. But for right now, I don't think so. So with that being said, that is the introduction to how I got to this point. That's one of the things that sparked it. And then, and to put more emphasis on where I'm going with this, that Eurasian presence is straight from this Australo Melanesian presence that came up out of ancient Europe and descended into the Levant, crossed over into to Africa. So no, what I'm suggesting is definitely not out of Africa, and then back into Africa type of situation. This gene flow is coming from ancient Europe to the Levant into North Africa, maybe, or it could have been directly from the Levant straight to West Africa. I think for sure some of the gene flow came from North Africa, because that same Black Eurasian gene flow went into North Africa from the Levant. So yeah, that sets the stage. We're already an hour in, so I don't know if I'll get through the whole genomic study. I'm gonna try, and just so we can, establish that foundation and have that over with, and then wrap it up with more of a summary in part two, and really, hammer this home. But yeah, that's the backdrop. So for now, let me get this off the screen, and I'm gonna get the genomic study on the screen. All right. Now I'm gonna get my music back playing, man, so I can get state. Oh, something that the other side of the fence is going to have a lot of issues with, but it's going to be hard for him to really say much about it because it's just one of them things just going to be what it's going to be. And, sometimes we got to deal with stuff in life that we don't particularly like, but whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? Where is my study at? That's interesting. Here it is. Okay. All right. All right. So I'm going to close this and I'm going to start it from the beginning fresh. Let's try to anyway. Yeah, start new chat. That's what I want. All right. So this article is titled Paleogenomics of Upper Paleolithic to Neolithic European Hunter-Gatherers. All right. As you can see here, the study was published in 2023, March 1st, 2023. So there's a fairly recent publication. And so yeah, we're not gonna entertain any of that BS about it's not a recent study, so it doesn't count. That this here, it doesn't apply. That doesn't apply here. And so we just gonna get that established off the bat. Okay, and we just gonna go ahead and get into it. And so what I'm gonna do here, like I said, is as we go through these populations, I'm going to use Gemini to demonstrate what haplogroup that these populations are carrying. So here we go. Modern humans have populated Europe for more than 45,000 years. Our knowledge of the genetic relatedness and structure of ancient hunter-gatherers is, however, limited, owing to the scarceness and poor molecular preservation of human remains from that period. Here we analyze 356 ancient hunter-gatherer genomes, including new genomic data for 116 individuals from 14 countries in Western and Central Eurasia, spanning between 35,000 and 5,000 years ago. We identify a genetic ancestry profile in individuals associated with Upper Paleolithic Gravidian assemblages from Western Europe that is distinct from the contemporaneous groups related to this archaeological culture in Central and Southern Europe, but resembles that of preceding individuals associated with the Melanesian culture. This ancestry profile survived during the last glacial maximum, which is from 25,000 and 19,000 years ago, in human populations from southwestern Europe associated with the Solotrian culture and with the following Magdalenian culture that re-expanded northeastward after the last glacial maximum. Conversely, we reveal a genetic turnover in southern Europe, suggesting a local replacement of human groups around the time of the last glacial maximum, accompanied by a north to south dispersal of populations associated with the Gravidian culture from at least 14,000 years ago. An ancestry related to this culture spread from the south across the rest of Europe, largely replacing the Magdalenian associated gene pool. After a period of limited admixture that spanned the beginning of the Mesolithic, we find genetic interactions between Western and Eastern European hunter-gatherers who are also characterized by marked differences in phenotypically relevant variants. So yeah, they're explaining how, they're explaining the migrational patterns in ancient Europe from before the last glacial maximum to after, and how the population turnover changed from the most ancient population to basically the modern population that we see now. And what you're going to see as well, that contemporary Europeans they don't align directly with, or as direct descendants from these populations, but this is where they get most of their gene flow from. But anyway, man, I'm gonna let the article explain itself, and I'm just go ahead and read it and not be too long-winded with this, and hopefully I can finish this within like maybe 45 minutes to a half hour, maybe, hopefully. But anyway, modern humans left sub-Saharan Africa at least 60,000 years ago, and during their initial expansion into Eurasia, they genetically mixed with Neanderthals, resulting in 2 to 3% Neanderthal ancestry in the majority of present-day non-African populations. Genomic data have shown that modern humans were present in West Eurasia. Now, let's talk about this. Now, it's saying that 60,000 years ago, humans expanded into Eurasia. Now, we already know from the Mesoamerica sample that was associated with Kennewick Man, and most associated with Kennewick Man, he was already in Eurasia 65,000 years ago. Now they're saying here that sub-Saharans left and went out of Africa 60,000 years ago. So this is another time crunch placed on this out of Africa theory. And again, the only available fossil evidence is from outside of Africa. And again, it's older than this out of Africa theory. So anyway, keep going. And but despite that, they're still trying to push the out of Africa theory. Just want to point that out. Genomic data have shown that the modern humans were present in Western Eurasia at least 45,000 years ago. Some of these early groups from more than 40,000 years ago further admixed with Neanderthals, as shown by signals of recent integration in individuals from Bako, Cairo in Bulgaria, associated with the initial Upper Paleolithic archaeological culture, and from the Pestara Kuwais in Romania. Other individuals from that period, such as the Salati Kun from the Sigetia and Ust Ishim from Russia. And let's stop. I'm gonna start plugging these in. Let's do what haplogroup did the Salati Kun have? Let me make sure this is all on the screen. Yeah, you guys can't see that part. Yeah, unfortunately. So I'm gonna have to keep going back and forth. But I can share it on my window. I'm gonna try that. Okay, it says this was a female. Let me I'm gonna stop sharing. And I'm gonna do this a different type of way. I'm gonna remove this and I'm gonna get it back on the screen by sharing my entire screen. And I'm gonna go back to this article over here. And I gotta make sure I actually put it on the screen. Add it to the screen. Okay, you guys should be able to see that. I hope so. If not, what I probably can do is maybe just have ChatGPT just summarize all of these populations mentioned here, and maybe in some type of table, and give you guys that visual. But I think you guys should be able to see this now as I'm doing this. But I'm gonna read it out anyway. So this first specimen, spelled ZLATY, coon, was actually a female, and they only had the MtDNA, which is MtDNA N. Okay, so let's move to the next individual. I'm gonna put in Ishim. All right, finally, so here we go. Okay, this one is Y chromosome K2A. This lineage is basal to both haplogroup N and O, the ancestor of modern O and N lineages, and a rare ancient lineage found in the Upper Paleolithic OAS-1 specimen from Romania. All right, so we got that established. Let's keep going. So, indicating differential interactions between Neanderthals and early modern humans during their initial expansions across Eurasia. Surprisingly, however, none of these pre-40,000-year-old individuals left substantial traces in the genetic makeup of present-day Eurasian populations. I'm gonna read that again. Where I'm at. Okay, it says, I'm gonna start from the top. Other individuals from the period, such as Zlati Kun from Czechia and Ishim from Russia, do not carry significantly more Neanderthal ancestry than other non-African groups, indicating differential interactions between Neanderthals and early modern humans during their initial expansions across Eurasia. Surprisingly, however, none of those pre-40,000-year-old individuals left substantial traces in the genetic makeup of present-day Eurasian populations. Okay, so clearly they're indicating that there was a population replacement throughout Eurasia. The oldest genomes carrying ancestries that derive primarily from the lineage leading to present-day Europeans are the Konstanki 14 from 37,000 years ago, with uncertain archaeological association from Western Russia. The Goya Q116 1 from 35,000 years ago. The Aurignacian associated from Belgium and Bako Cairo 1653 from 35,000 years ago, probably Aurignacian associated from Bulgaria. So I'm gonna put these in. What we got first? We want to do the Kostinki. Whatever, man. Doing the best I can with these pronunciations. All right. So this one here, as you can see, belongs to the C1B1A, the C1B1A1A, actually. Specifically CN216, or a basal subclade under C1b. This is one of the earliest branches of haplogroup C found in Eurasia. So again, this puts a strain on the out of Africa theory, because it's telling you right here that this is pretty basal. So if you're following the out of Africa theory, you have to accept that this C haplogroup splits from the superclade CF in Southeast Asia. And as a matter of fact, I'm gonna ask the Gemini, where did the most likely split take place for the CF haplogroup? I'm gonna put MtDNA so I don't have to wonder what. I don't think it's yeah, it is a C MtDNA, I believe. With the Y DNA. I'll put MtDNA in there. I'm gonna put where and when. That's important too. Where and when. Okay, it says split took place between 60 and 68,500 years ago. The CF lineage itself branched off from the macro haplogroup CT. The bifurcation, the subsequent split that created C and F occurred shortly thereafter, with many estimates centering around 65,000 years ago, just like I said earlier. Genetic data indicates this split happened rapidly in evolutionary terms, likely within less than 1,000 years of CF's own formation, representing a swift diversification of early modern humans as they established themselves beyond Africa. Where did the split take place? While earlier models traditionally favored Northeast Africa or Southwest Asia, the Middle East, as the staging ground for the initial non-African splits, more recent phylogeographic analysis and ancient DNA modeling have shifted the consensus. Today, the most widely accepted location for the diversification of these lineages is South Asia or Southeast Asia. So once again, this gene flow is coming from outside of Africa, coming from the east, as this clearly says right here. So today, the most widely accepted diversification of these lineages is in South Asia or Southeast Asia. The sibling trajectories. The primary reason for Southeast Asian origin model is the deep geography of its immediate descendants. Following the split, haplogroup C lineages spread extensively along the southern coastal littoral environments into Wallachia, Sahel, Aboriginal Australians and Papuans, and East Asia. Concurrently, haplogroup F stayed centered in mainland Eurasia, eventually acting as the super grandfather lineage that radiated westward and into Europe and eastward across Central and East Asia. All right. Yeah, and I can expand that. That's better. Okay. Lineage tracking. High resolution phylogenetic testing of rare deep rooting basal branches pointing strongly to an early eastern bottleneck or rapid expansion zone, suggesting that the parent CF population traveled along a rapid southern coastal path before fracturing into the distinct inland F and coastal island C founder groups. And I'm going to read this first part one more time. The sibling trajectories. The primary reason for Southeast Asian origin model is the deep geography of its intermediate descendants. Following the split, haplogroup C lineages spread extensively along the southern coastal littoral environments into, you can see that, haplogroup F stayed centered in mainland Eurasia, eventually acting as the super grandfather lineage that radiated westward into Europe and eastward across Central and East Asia. So F is going to become the more modern, like the second layer of ancient Europe after its C sibling was there before. The F was with it as well, but the F is eventually going to replace the C throughout Eurasia. And this is the reason why contemporary Europeans carry the haplogroups that are under this F haplogroup. All right, and so what I'm gonna ask it now is, what and how would be the most probable mechanism that the Y-DNA C would be in ancient Paleolithic Europe before the last LGM. Based on both genetic modeling of upper Paleolithic populations and deep rooting phylogeographic data, the presence of Y-DNA C, specifically lines related to C1b in Europe before the last glacial maximum, exemplified by individuals like the Konstanky 14, is best explained by a rapid early northern radiation or bifurcated inland migration model. Here's the most probable mechanism for how it arrived: the rapid staging ground bifurcation. Following the initial split of the macro haplogroup CF into C and F, early modern humans did not immediately flood into all corners of Eurasia. Instead, they spent millennia diversifying in a basal Eurasian or Southwest South Asian staging ground. When the major expansion into deeper Eurasia finally began, haplogroup C had already fractured into early sub-lineages. C1a and C1b represent highly mobile, adventurous branches, while some C lineages move south and east toward Sahel. A Pacific sister branch of C1b moved northward alongside or just ahead of early F-derived lineages. So again, it's identifying that the gene flow is radiating from the east again. Now it's still saying that it came out of Africa originally, but it radiated and dispersed from the east, moving into the west. So let's get back to the article, man. Yeah, we're gonna nip this this question of whether or not Europe was of a Negro stock. And this may have just been one of the Negro presence in ancient Europe. But anyway, let's do the Goyet Q 116-1. Already got that up there. Put the question mark. So now we got the C1A here. And yep. So that one is C1A. So now you got the sister branch of the C1. They got them both together. They're both together in ancient Europe. And where did it say that it came from? It confirmed that it came from Southeast Asia. Before, I guess it's saying before, the oceanic population moved into Oceania. Before the Australo-Melanesians moved into Oceania. And so I'm gonna keep moving and I'm gonna keep lining this up. The oldest genomes carrying ancestries that derive primarily from the lineage leading to, all right, we did that. These data suggest that the genetic ancestries identified in the pre-40,000-year-old individuals analyzed so far went largely extinct or were assimilated by subsequent expansions. The Kostecki genetic signature related to Kostecki 14 genome and hereafter referred to as the Kostecki cluster contributed to the later Vistanese genetic cluster. Okay, the Vistanese was mentioned in that Kennewick-Men study. The Vistanese, if I'm not mistaken, Lebrana showed the most affinity to the Vistanese. And so now you're getting a picture of how later populations are looking now. Their baseline foundational population is from the same lineage that Austro-Melanesians descend from. Okay, and I think later on we're gonna get these time periods for the Vistanese and the Lebrana. So I don't want to say something, I had that wrong. I want to make sure I got that right. So, and as a matter of fact, I was going to go on to give some, a time frame here. But it says contributed to the later Vistanese genetic cluster. After the Vistanese cluster ancestry, named after the Donai Vistanese site in Czechia. This genetic signature is shared among individuals associated with the archaeological defined Dravidian culture. in Central and Southern Europe and seemingly disappeared after the last glacial maximum. And it's going to go on to say how these populations, at least in part, how they disappeared. And I'm just going to read it straight from this genomic study. Or in the meantime, I'm gonna get the haplogroups. What haplogroups were associated with the Dravidian culture prior to the LGM. Once again, Melanesian. Now, at this point too, we start seeing that the descendants of the haplogroup F, which is the sister or brother to the C, because they both split from the CF, they're starting to enter here as well with the haplogroup I. Haplogroup I is what Cheddar Man had as well. So you can kind of visualize how this population is shaping up. We know that they consider Cheddar Man to be an ancient Black European, but Cheddar Man, I think his population group, I believe, was like to 12 to 14,000 years ago. We're talking about prior to the last glacial maximum, which is, like they said here in this genomic study, was before 25,000 years ago. And here you have it associated. They have the range for the Dravidian culture between 33 to 26,000 years ago, which was well before the existence of the population associated with Cheddar Man. So what I'm saying is that Cheddar Man will probably represent a population that is very distant from the original foundational population that entered ancient Europe, and he's still Black. So you know what I mean? But anyway, let's keep going. However, the genetic profile of contemporaneous Dravidian associated individuals from Western Europe remains unknown, as is their contribution to populations after the LGM. Known to have been the coldest phase of the last ice age, the LGM is considered to have caused a demographic decline in large parts of Europe, with populations retracting to southern latitudes, as attested, for example, by the contemporaneity of the Solutrean culture in the Iberian Peninsula in southern France. This genome study is going to go on to explain how the Solutrean population migrated and why they migrated to the Iberian Peninsula. But anyway, other proposed climatic refugia for human survival during the period are the Italian Peninsula, the Balkans, and the southeastern European plain. But the actual genetic contribution of populations from these regions to post-LGM Europeans is highly debated. After the LGM, a genetic component distantly linked to the Goyet Q116, one individual from Belgium dated to 35,000 years ago, named Goyet Q2 ancestry. The Goyet, it says here after the Goyet Q2 cluster or ancestry reappeared in individuals from southwestern and central Europe associated with the Mendelian culture. 19,000 and 14,000 years ago from Iberia to Eastern Europe across Central Europe, and in the admixed form in subsequent final Paleolithic and Mesolithic hunter-gatherers. I'm gonna stop here and I'm gonna put in, what about the Magdalenian Ilian culture? I spelled that wrong. I said I spelled Magdalenian incorrectly, but it'll probably understand what I'm talking about anyway. Okay, so haplogroup I. So you can see how things were shifting. Now, for the types of people who don't understand how genetics works, even though you're having a turnover, you don't just all of a sudden the prior population doesn't just cease to exist. And we see this represented in Cheddarman. You know, we can use him as a benchmark for that type of testimony. Anyway, I'm gonna continue to read this. Instead, in Southern Europe, a distinct hunter-gatherer genetic profile was found as early as 17,000 years ago in individuals associated with the Epigravidian culture. 24 to 12,000 years ago, from the Italian peninsula to the southeastern European plain across the Balkans. This Villabruna ancestry showed connections to ancient and present-day Near Eastern populations. So let's see what Villabruna was. Because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Villabruna showed high affinity with El Moran, and modern populations of America shows affinity with El Moran. So let's see what Villabruna was. Villabruna. Okay, so Villabruna was more of this is shifting into the more contemporary Y-DNAs, even though the R1b was not initially associated with what you would call contemporary Europeans, but it's still marking that shift into it. So anyway, let's continue. The Villabruna ancestry showed connections to ancient and present day Near Eastern populations, but the mode and tempo of its expansion into the Italian peninsula remain unexplored. The Villabruna ancestry later appeared in Central Europe and is thought to have largely replaced groups related to the Goya QT ancestry. So let me back this up for a second. If you have, if the El Moran showed affinity to the Villabruna and vice versa, and the Villabruna carried Y-DNA R1b before contemporary Europeans entered the Americas. I'm talking about colonial Europeans before they entered the Americas. Could it quite possibly be that some Black Americans carry that R1b from indigenous populations? Now, you'll have to go back to the Kennewick series and actually understand what I'm talking about to understand that. But yeah, that's I'm I'm just lining this up and putting it together because mainstream academia has their own way of telling this story, which we know is inaccurate. You know that it's inaccurate, at least I do, and many other people. We still may be in the minority slightly, but there are a lot of people who understand that mainstream academia projection that they're putting in our educational institutions is flawed, and it is purposely flawed. So I want to check El Moran while we talking about El Moran. I don't even think I need that dash right there. I'm gonna ask him about El Moran. So no DNA recovered for El Moran. Dang it. So I'm gonna put, what about, well, it says that the El Moran is associated with the goid. And we know that the goid is of the C haplogroup. And Kennewick Man himself was associated with the Solutrean model as well, and he had Austro-Melanesian affinities. And so this is where, in the objectives, I said that I'm gonna demonstrate where Kennewick Man possibly got his Austro-Melanesian affinities from, because based on the study, and I'm gonna bring this up on ChatGPT too. I'm gonna go back up here, and I asked ChatGPT, how can we determine that Kennewick Man did not get his Austro-Melanesian traits from oceanic populations? Let's see if I can hurry up and get to this. I think I went too far. Let's see. Actually, no, I didn't. Okay. Let's go up some more. Further. That's interesting too, but I'm not going to cover that right now. I'm going to get to that later. I'm going to trace it. I might just put the question in again. Oh, you know what? I'm in the wrong thread. It's supposed to be this thread. Now let me go back up. And I'm going to come back to that thread as well, because it discusses the link between this Melanesian population in Europe into the Levant. And that gets very interesting. But I want to go back up to this question that I asked ChatGPT. I'm almost there. Since the paper stated that the African archaic signal came from a specimen 65,000 years ago, could the conclusion be made that the African signal was the older signal? Let me make sure it's around here somewhere. I was talking about this. Yeah, here we go. So the question must be up here. From the study, how do you know Kennewick man didn't obtain his Austro-Melanesian ancestry from oceanic populations? ChatGPT says, based on Huang's study alone, you actually cannot conclude that Kennewick obtained the Australo-Melanesian related signal directly from oceanic populations. In fact, Huang's interpretation points in a different direction. Here's why. Huang's analyses are based on a genetic affinity, not direct migration. The study finds that Kennewick shows greater affinity to populations such as the Mamamwa, Papuans, and Aboriginal Australians. And so, again, this is what gave me the mindset to title this presentation like I did, because in the Kennewick man study that I cited in that series, it clearly said that Kennewick man had Australo-Melanesian affinities, and based on how the paper was worded, you could infer that it was not saying that Kennewick man got those affinities from the oceanic populations. He already had it. Now, he shares the most affinity with the Mesmachia, which is 65,000 years ago. So I'm not saying that he got the Austro-Melanesian affinity that long ago, but in general, I think you understand. You guys will understand what I'm saying. Austro-Melanesians were in that region very long ago. Based on the current evidence, the Mesmachia specimen is predating the presence of the Austro-Melanesians in that region, but that's what they know. That's the evidence that they have right now. We don't know if he obtained it 65,000 years ago, 40,000 years ago, or whatever. But what we do know is that Kennewick man had it before his population group entered the Americas. That's for sure. And this same signal is found in these populations listed here. So yes, it is the same type of signal based on the inference of this paper. If if people are wondering, does this C haplogroup necessarily mean that these were Australo-Melanesian type peoples? Yes, based on the 2018 genomic study, yes, this is the inference. If you follow the logic of the paper. So anyway, back to the study. I just wanted to establish that. Yeah, like I said, man, this is gonna be some heartbreaking information for some people, man. This is non-subjective, y'all. It's non-subjective. This is very difficult to argue with any good logic or any good faith. Anyway, let's go back. The Villebrana ancestry later appeared in Central Europe and is thought to have largely replaced groups related to the Goya Q2 ancestry. So that means that the Villebrana, even though they had, a certain Y DNA or what have you, they still replaced a population that only carried the C haplogroup. So you can expect them to have the same type of affinities. That affinity, you can imagine, got weaker as time went on, as more replacement happened. But anyway, moving on. However, its formation, diffusion, and interaction with contemporaneous hunter-gatherers from Eastern Europe and their interplay with later expansions of Neolithic farmers from Southeastern Europe are not well characterized. In this study, we analyzed 356 ancient hunter-gatherer genomes, including new genomic data of 116 individuals dated to 35 to 5,000 years ago, alongside a novel contamination estimation method based on runs of homozygosity. We provide a systematic description of the genomic transformations that hunter-gatherer groups experienced from the early Upper Paleolithic onwards across Western and Central Eurasia, and how those are possibly linked to cultural and climatic changes. So let's move it on down. Ancient DNA generation. Ancient DNA data generation. We generated genome-wide sequencing data for 102 newly reported hunter-gatherers and increased coverage for 14 previously published individuals. These data cover a time span of around 30,000 years from the Upper Paleolithic to the Late Neolithic, here by the presence of pottery rather than by farming substances. Derived from the multiple prehistoric cultural contexts and originate from 54 archaeological sites in 14 countries. The Aurignacian associated individual from Belgium and one culturally unassigned individual from Romania, 15 Gravidian associated individuals from Spain, France, Belgium, Czechia, and Italy. Solution associated individuals from Spain and France, 9 Magdalenian associated individuals from France, Germany, and Poland, 4 Epigravidian associated individuals from Italy, 2 Fortemesser associated individuals from Germany 14,000 years ago, and 81 Mesolithic to Neolithic foragers from across Western Eurasia, which is from 11,000 to 5,000 years ago, together with 1 Central Eurasian Neolithic individual from Tajikistan. Let me see what this, I don't think I put the Nation. Let's see what they haplogroup they actually was. See what this says. Once again, see Haplogroup. It says this is one of the definitive paternal signatures of the European Aurignacian. It is epitomized by the Goyet Q116-1 individual from Belgium, proving that branches of Haplogroup C were firmly entrenched in Western Europe long before the last glacial maximum. And it's curtains for them. They can't escape. They can't escape, man. All right, let's keep going. We built 1 to 8 single and double-stranded genetic libraries for each individual and enriched them for human DNA on 1.24 million single nucleotide polymorphisms, which were then sequenced and yielded 0.04 to 7.64 fold coverage on average over the targeted SNPs. Genetic sexing revealed 78 male individuals and 38 female individuals. The levels of contamination from modern human DNA were estimated on the basis of mitochondrial DNA, X chromosome, and autosomal DNA, and with haplotype copying model that is extended here to autosomal data in runs of homozygosity, substantially contaminated libraries as well as marginally contaminated libraries of individuals' analyzed genomes were filtered to maintain reads showing postmortem DNA damage. Pseudo-haploid genotypes were called on the targeted SNPs by randomly sampling a single allele at each position, resulting in individuals with 6,600 to 1.07 million SNPs covered on the 1.24 million SNP panel. The newly generated genotypes were merged with 240 published ancient hunter-gatherer genomes and modern worldwide populations for downstream analysis. All right, it says, contrary to the proposal in Fouet al., but in agreement with Portret al., we do not observe a substantial decrease of Neanderthal ancestry in most where's that picking up at? In most European hunter-gatherers through time. This provides further support for the model with no long-term decline of genome-wide Neanderthal ancestry in modern humans following their integration. Before the LGM, the Gravidian culture was one of the most widely distributed Upper Paleolithic cultures across Western Eurasia before the LGM. It is often considered as a pan-European cultural mosaic with regional variations in material to symbolic productions. In this debated framework, Gravidian-associated individuals have been suggested to represent a biologically homogeneous population on the basis of craniometric and where's that going? I don't know where that's going, y'all. I don't know where that's going. Oh, and genomic data. Okay, that highlight was messing me up. And genomic data. However, published Gravidian-associated genomes originate from Central and Southern Europe, leaving the genetic profile of Gravidian-associated human groups from Western and Southwestern Europe undescribed. To gain an overview of the genomic background of European hunter-gatherers before the LGM, we use multidimensional scaling to plot a dissimilarity matrix of pairwise outgroup F3 statistics in the form 1 F3. This plot reveals the presence of three distinct groupings: a pre-40,000 year ago group with individuals from the Ust-Ishim, Bako Cairo, Zalati Cone, and Pastara Ku sites, a Vestanese cluster including Gravidian-associated individuals from Central, Eastern, and Southern European sites, and compromising Gravidian. Okay, so it says these are the Fornol cluster, compromising Gravidian-associated individuals from Western and Southwestern European sites, the La Rochette, Fornol, and two Sirenaya cave sites. The previously described Vestanese cluster, including a newly reported 29,000-year-old individual from the Plagici cave in southern Italy, is closely related to the previously published genomes from Sagar and Kostanecki in 12 in western Russia, which are dated to 35,000 years ago to 32,000 years ago, respectively. So, once again, this C population group is in Russia as well, where the Mesmakai was found. So again, I'm just connecting these dots, tracing these lines, and putting it together. You know, individuals that come from the mindset of a Sean P, they can't grasp this multi-directional migrational gene flow. They think, oceanic populations were only in Oceania. He also thought they weren't Negroes too, but anyway, we can see here non-subjectively that they're in Russia as well, because these people don't believe black people were in Russia, in ancient times. They believe that they were only white contemporary Europeans. The genetic data says otherwise. The cranial morphology says otherwise. Okay. The newly defined Fourneau cluster is closely related to Agrionatian associated individuals from Belgium dated to 35,000 years ago. Notably, and contrary to the report by Fouetel El, another Gravidian associated population from Central West Europe in Belgium is both geographically and genetically intermediate between the Vestanese and the Fourneau clusters. The similarity between Goyet 1 and Goyet Q376-3 and the Fourneau cluster is also observed at the MtDNA level, with both groups including individuals who carried MtDNA haplogroup M, which has not been found in European individuals from after the LGM. So it's even saying that even the maternal line was replaced after the last glacial maximum. We further validated the genetic distinction between the Vestanese and Fourneau clusters observed in the MDS plot with a series of F4 statistics. All individuals belonging to the Fourneau cluster show higher affinity to the Goyet Q116-1 than to the Sagur group, and the Vestanese cluster individuals show higher affinity to the Sagur group than the Goyet Q116. I think the Sagur group, I'm just doing it anyway. I'm pretty sure I know what it is based on the other individuals associated with the population, but I'm just going to put it in here so people can see it. Okay, once again, why DNAC? Okay, this is becoming the pattern. It is the pattern, just like Gemini said. We further validated the genetic distinction between the Vestanese and the Fourneau clusters observed in the MDS plot with a series of F4 statistics. All individuals belonging to the Fourneau cluster show higher affinity to Goyet Q116-1 than to the Sagur group, and the Vestanese cluster individuals show higher affinity to the Sagur group to the Goyet Q116-1. These F4 statistics also confirm that the Goyet Q376-3 carries a similar ancestry to Goyet Q116-1, and Kostenki 12 carries similar ancestry to the Sagur group, whereas the Bako Cairo 1653 from Bulgaria, the Mereri, and the Psychokovina 1 from Romania, and the Plegiki from southern Italy are equally related to the Goyet Q116-1 and Sagur. So basically, they're of the same haplogroup population. We further tested whether individuals included in the Vestanese and the Fourneau clusters share similar allele frequencies with the main representatives of those two clusters. With the statistics F4, and they use them in Butu as a reference to to measure negative affinity, basically how far divergent they were from them. Basically, the 4985 Vestanese test and the F4 Mobutu Vestanese 4985 test, we show that all Vestanese cluster individuals are significantly closer to the Vestinese group, and the Fornal cluster individuals are closer to the Fornal 85, whereas the geographically intermediate Gravidian associated Goyet group show extra affinity to both clusters. We further modeled the genetic profile of pre-LGM individuals with QP graph, supplementary information section 10 and supplementary figures 19 through 25. The admixture graph showed that the Baco-Cairo IUP group shares ancestry with multiple early modern human lineages, and that the more than 45,000-year-old Zalati-Kun genome is the most deeply divergent non-African lineage sequence to date. This is also validated by the F4 statistic of the form. By that wording, what they're saying is that this specimen, which is the Zalati-Kun genome, it's the closest to what you would call the African genome. It's the least diverse, basically. It's the deepest rooted. Its ancestry goes back the deepest to the out of Africa separation, is what it's saying. This is also validated by the F4 statistics of the form, which are consistent with 0 for all other pre-LGM LGM hunter-gatherers, indicating a equidistant relationship of the Zatlakun to the tested groups. When the Gravidian-associated individuals are included in the admixture graph, also featuring Kostinski 14, we find that the 485 fits best as a sister lineage of Goyet, of the Goyet Q116-1, whereas the Vestinese group is modeled as a mixture between lineage related to the Sunga group and one related to the Goyet Q116-1 Fornal 85 branch. This is also supported by the F4 statistics of the form F4, which are significantly positive for all individuals included in the Vestinese cluster. Therefore, as previously reported, the Vestinese cluster itself results from the admixture between Western and Eastern lineages, which might contribute to the observed homogeneity in cranial morphology among Gravidian-associated individuals. The results show that some, but not all, of the genomic ancestries present in Europe between 40,000 and 30,000 years ago survived in the Gravidian-associated population studied so far. The Kostinski and Segura group ancestry contributed to the previously described Vestinese cluster, represented by Gravidian-associated individuals from Central, Eastern, and Southern Europe. By contrast, the Goyet Q116-1 genetic profile gave rise to the newly described Fornal cluster, identified in the Gravidian-associated individuals from Western and Southwestern Europe. Notably, this genetic distinction coincides with dissimilarities in mortuary practice among genetically analyzed Gravidian-associated individuals from different parts of Europe. Individuals in Western and Southwestern Europe related to the Fornal cluster are consistently deposited in cave sites and occasionally exhibit anthropogenic marks, whereas individuals related to the Vestinese cluster are buried with grave goods and personal ornaments in ochre in open air or cave sites in Central, Eastern, and Southern Europe, respectively. The oldest individual in the Fornal cluster is Ormusson 2988 from northeastern France, whereas the Gravidian group from Goyet in Belgium is found to be a mixture between the Vestinese and Fornal clusters. So let's see what this Ormusson specimen is. Okay, so they were the I haplogroup as well, which are descendants from the F haplogroup, which is basically the brother or sister to the C. All right, moving on. This suggests that between the early, middle, and late Gravidian, there was an east to west expansion of the Vestinese associated ancestry that reached central western Europe and created a longitudinal admixture. The admixture climbed between those genetically distinct pre-LGM populations. So, what we see in here is just not a C haplogroup population. We're seeing, like they said, a mosaic of the C haplogroup. These are different populations within the sphere of the C haplogroup, F haplogroup uh, community, cross landmass community, however you want to say it. This was a highly structured ancient European civilization. This wasn't like some type of subtle, hunter-gatherer, little tribal type of thing going on. This was a highly structured, highly populated ancient European civilization, because if you study genomics, you understand that to achieve such a mosaic, you have to have at least an effective population size to be able to do so. Now, what a effective population size means in definitive numbers, can't really say, but we know that it has to be large enough to accommodate these many different subgroups within this mosaic. So let's keep going. LGM in southwestern and western Europe. The Seleucian culture is temporarily intermediate between the Gravidian and Magdalenian cultures, and is found in the southwestern and western Europe, which are considered to have been climatic refugia for human populations during the LGM. However, the extent to which groups associated with the Seleucian culture are in genetic continuity with earlier and later populations from the same region is unknown, because no genomic data from the Seleucian associated individuals have been reported previously. Both newly sequenced genomes from Seleucian associated individuals, like the Lepage 2 from southwestern France and the Larira from northern Spain, show a generalized affinity with members of the Fornon and Goet Q2 clusters and outgroup F3 statistics. So let's see what the Lepage was. Lepage 2. And then I'm gonna do the La Riera and see what they look like. And here they're saying that these genetics continue into the LGM. Okay, so this is the I haplogroup once again. So they are continuing into the LGM. Let's put this out. Okay, suggesting that local genetic continuity of this ancestry during the LGM. F4 statistics further support this view, revealing that the Lepage 2 is more closely related to the Fornal cluster than the Vestinese cluster. And I forgot to do the Barrera. Let me do that. Then the Lepage. Now we want to do the Larera. Yeah, I spelled that right. And really, I could have just had AI, could just had ChatGPT just put down, put together a visual, which I did, and just use that. But I wanted to demonstrate this is coming straight from the genomic study itself, and that's the only way I could do it. So, okay, so why DNA is unknown because this is a female, but it does say that the MtDNA associated with this individual was U5B1, a highly resilient maternal lineage that became a signature marker for post-glacial European hunter-gatherers surviving the last glacial maximum. All right, let's go back up to the top of this right column and pick up. It says, in spite of a growing discussions about the nature of the Afro-Gravidian culture has been traditionally assumed to be a result of a transition from the preceding local Gravidian. Hold on. I think it's part of, I'm up here. Okay. We also compare this affinity to El Moran, the oldest Magdalenian associated individual sequence to date. F statistics suggest that the Lepage 2 is genetically intermediate between the Fornon 85 and the El Moran. Moreover, previous studies have shown that El Moran carries a genetic contribution from the Villabrana cluster, which is found in the Epigravidian associated individuals from Italy. El Moran has a significantly higher similarity to the Villabrana cluster than the Fornon 85 and the Lepage 2, while the affinity to the Villabrana cluster in Lepage 2 is not significantly higher than in the Fornon 85. Overall, the Salutrian associated Lepage 2 individual links to the preceding Fornon ancestry with the succeeding ancestry found in El Moran, providing direct evidence for genetic continuity through the LGM in southwestern and western Europe. These European regions therefore constitute climatic refugia where human populations survived during the LGM. Post-LGM in the Italian peninsula. After the LGM, the Epigravidian culture was widespread in southern and southeastern Europe. In spite of growing discussions about its nature, the Epigravidian culture has been traditionally assumed to be the result of a transition from the preceding local Gravidian. However, the level of genetic continuity between individuals associated with these cultures and the population structure among the Epigravidian associated individuals have not been fully explored. Here we report the genomic data from 4 individuals, including 3 approximately 13,000 years old genomes from northeast Italy. It says the Predis 1, northwestern Italy, the Emring Candide 16, and the Santorodora 2, as well as an increased genomic wide coverage from Tekla Yeti 215. I'm gonna put all of these in here. Pradis 1. Okay, so it's still Y-DNA-Y. Let's see what the MtDNA looks like. U5B1 still. Let's do a ring. (16) And by the way, this study might show 27 pages, but it's really only, I think, like 8 or 9 pages for real. The rest of it is like, accreditations, or uh, who's involved in the study, so forth and so on, where the information came from, and blah blah. So we're on page 4. It ain't gonna take me too much longer to get to the rest of these pages. But anyway, the I haplogroup again. Who's left in here? We did already. Let's see what the, okay. Yep, same thing. San Teodoro. And I think this would be considered the Mesolithic period. This would be the period associated with Cheddar Man. Yep. I'm still going to do this last one, even though we know by now how this is going to turn out. At least we got an idea. I spelled that wrong. Yeah, same thing. So we can see, at least in this group, we can see this population shift taking place. But again, this is just this is only just the sister brother haplogroup to the C. So even still, they wouldn't look too much different. Maybe further down the line in their descendants, they start looking different at that time. But originally, they travel together, and you can expect them to be very similar in genome and phenotype. Let's go back up here to where I was. Lost my place. Yeah, here we go. All right, in the MDS plot, we find that all of the newly and previously reported Epigravidian associated individuals fall within the Villa-Brana cluster. A series of symmetry statistics confirm that all the Epigravidian associated individuals are claddal and do not share excess affinity with any local or non-local preceding ancestries. Moreover, none of the Epigravidian associated individuals have more affinity to Southern European than to Central Eastern European Gravidian associated groups, as shown by Epigravidian associated individual. Group Vestinese Bagade, just sharing what specimen. Next, we investigated the genetic relationships between the Epigravidian associated individuals across the Italian peninsula while reconstructing a phylogeny based on a matrix of pairwise F2 genetic distances and testing the relative affinity among them using F4 statistics in the form F4. The inferred topology reveals a phylogeographic pattern irrespective of individual ages. In particular, the 13,000-year-old Pradis 1 individual from northeastern Italy represents the most basal lineage compared to all other Epigravidian associated individuals, including the older Tagliente 2 and the Villa-Bruna genomes from northern Italy. Individuals from northwestern Italy Arene Candide 16 in central Italy, Continenza in Sicily fall on phylogenetically more derived branch group 2, which further diversified into a branch composed of Sicilian hunter-gatherers only. Only within Sicily, the 14,000-year-old Oriente C individual shows higher affinity with the much younger but geographically closer 10,000-year-old Uzo group than with the almost contemporaneous Santerodoro 2 individual from eastern Sicily. Finally, we estimated the genetic diversity of the Epigravidian associated individuals in the data set by calculating both pairwise mismatch rates on pseudo-haploid genotypes and individual heterozygosity levels on pseudo-diploid genotypes, compared with very small recent effective population size estimated to be in the order of around 70 individuals, causing a low genetic diversity in Sicilian Epigravidian hunter-gatherers. To summarize, our results highlight a genetic turnover in the Italian peninsula of the Gravidian-associated Vistanese cluster by the Epigravidian-associated Villabrona cluster that might correlate with discontinuities observed in the archaeological record. We show that all analyzed Epigravidian-associated individuals carry a homogeneous Villabruna ancestry with the intragroup genetic structure mainly determined by their geographical and non-temporal distribution. The phylogenetic reconstruction of Epigravidian-associated genomes with Predis 1 diverging more deeply than all others indicates that the turnover took place much earlier than 17,000 years ago. The date of the more derived Tagliente 2 genome, this together with the evidence of the Villabruna ancestry in El Moran 19,000 years ago, further suggests that this genetic discontinuity could be the result of a paleogeographic and paleoecological transformation connected to the LGM, rather to the Bowling-Olerod warming period. In addition, our phylogeographic analysis points to northern Italy as the possible entry point of the Epigravidian associated gene pool in the Italian peninsula. This finding, in conjunction with the genetic affinity of the Villabruna cluster to ancient and present day Near Eastern ancestries, supplementary suggests that the Balkans as a source suggests that the Balkans as a source. I lost my reading spot. In addition to phylogenetic analysis points to the northeastern and possible entry point in terms of peninsula, finding the conjunction of the genetic affinity of the relative coastal ancient suggests the Balkans as a source of the incoming Epigravidian associated population. The LGM could thus have created a corridor south of the Alps for the east to west human movements that genetically connected hunter-gatherer populations from the Balkans to Iberia, possibly also via dispersals along the existing lower sea level coast. Post-LGM in Western and Central Europe. The Magdalenian culture was widely distributed in southwestern, western, and central Europe after the LGM. Despite this wide geographical range, it is not clear whether different groups associated with this culture originated from a common source population and how those groups were genetically related to each other. Previous studies identified two different genetic compositions in the Magdalenian associated individuals, the Goic-Q2 cluster, including Central Western European genomes dated to around 15,000 years ago, and the ancestry of the El Moran individual from Spain from around 19,000 years ago. Both of these ancestries carry a genetic component distantly related to the Goic Q116-1 individual dated to 35,000 years ago, with the Iberian individual also showing an affinity to the Villabruna cluster. By co-analyzing previously published data with our newly reported genomes associated with the MtDNA from LaMarche and Pizivant, in western and northern France, respectively, the Mazaica in southern Poland, we confirmed that the Goyet Q116-1 ancestry survived in all studied Magdalenian associated genomes besides in the Gravidian Solutrean associated individuals from southwestern and western Europe. So it did not survive in the Gravidian and Solutrean associated individuals from southwestern and western Europe in that time period. Notably, the Fornal cluster, the Fornal ancestry provides better proxy than the Goyet Q116-1 for the genetic component found in the Goyet Q2 cluster in El Moran. However, using F4 statistics, we show that all Magdalenian associated individuals and not only El Moran carry a Villabona related ancestry when compared to the Fornal cluster. This affinity is even stronger towards the Epigravidian associated individuals from western and central Italy and Sicily. We thus model individuals belonging to the Goyet Q2 cluster in El Moran as a mixture between the Fornal 85 and the Arene Candide 16 genomes as proxies to represent the Fornal and Villabona ancestries, respectively, in the Magdalenian associated groups. Besides El Moran, who has around 43% Villabona ancestry, all other Magdalenian associated individuals have a lower proportion of this component, 19 to 29%, and can thus be assigned to the Goyet Q2 cluster. This is further validated by F4 statistics of the form F4, which is significantly positive only for El Moran, whereas other tested individuals in Goyet Q2 are symmetrically related with the respect to the Arene Candide 16. Our analysis demonstrate that the Fornal cluster is a better source for Magdalenian associated genomes than Goyet Q116-1. Therefore, most of the ancestry found in the post-LGM individuals is probably traced back to the Gravidian associated groups from Western and Southwestern Europe. The genetic affinity to the Villabona ancestry is present in El Moran and in Magdalenian associated individuals from Western and Central Europe. This suggests that the genetic links between Southern and Southwestern European hunter-gatherers around the time of the LGM extended north of the Pyrenees. The resulting Goyet Q2 cluster includes individuals spanning from Western France to Poland in the period between 18 and 15,000 years ago. Therefore, contrary to the previous suggestions, this demonstrates that the post-LGM diffusion of the Magdalenian was indeed associated with northward and northeastward population expansions from Western Europe. Post-14,000 Neolithic. Previous studies have shown that two main hunter-gatherer ancestries were predominant across most parts of Europe after around 14,000 years ago. That is, the Western hunter-gatherer ancestry that's associated with Cheddar Man, related to the Villabona cluster in the Eastern hunter-gatherer ancestry, showing affinity to both the Villabona and the ancient North Eurasian ancestry found in the Upper Paleolithic Siberian individuals. Now, again, if you guys remember, the A&E is a major part of the ancestry for contemporary Native Americans, and it is the progenitor to the R1b. All right, so hunter-gatherers carrying an admix, Western hunter-gatherer, Eastern hunter-gatherer genetic profile have been sequenced from various regions of Northern and Eastern Europe, raising the question of how these two types of ancestries formed and interacted with each other through time and space. In the MDS plot and West Eurasian principal component analysis, extended data figure 6 and supplementary figure 14, most post 14,000 individuals, 14,000 year ago individuals from Western and Central Europe fall close to the Western hunter-gatherer cluster, and those from Eastern Europe close to the Eastern hunter-gatherer cluster. Whereas the Turkal, one individual from Central Asia, falls close to the A&E related group. The two 14,000 year ago Oberkassel individual marked the earliest presence of the Western hunter-gatherer ancestry north of the Alps. I don't think I did this one. I'm gonna do this real quick. Oberkassel. Okay, still a haplogroup I. All right. So picking up where we left off, it says, which we therefore renamed the Upper Castle cluster using the name of the oldest reported individual to date carrying such ancestry with more than one-fold coverage for consistency. On the basis of F4 statistics, we find that individuals assigned to the Oberkassel cluster are closer to the Arene Candide 16 genome than any other Epigravidian associated group from Italy. Moreover, the Oberkassel cluster carries both Villabranna ancestry and a contribution from Goya Q2 ancestry. This was confirmed with the QP ADM, in which we could model all individuals from the Oberkassel cluster as a broadly constant mixture of approximately 75% Emery Candide, 16 to 25% Goya Q2. The observation that the post 14,000 year ago individuals from Western and Central Europe and also from Britain carry a homogeneous genetic makeup instead of displaying repeated local admixtures with Goya Q2 ancestry implies that the Oberkassel ancestry profile was already largely formed before its dispersal. This in sharp contrast to the genetic history of Iberian hunter-gatherers, where the spread of the Villabranna Oberkassel ancestry involved multiple local admixture events with groups carrying proportions of Goya Q2 ancestry. The long-lasting genetic continuity in Iberia is also reflected in the preservation until the Mesolithic of Y chromosome haplogroup C, which was predominant in the pre-LGM groups but rarely found after the LGM in other parts of Europe. So the C was still in Iberia. Into the Mesolithic period. So you're seeing the directional flow of where the sea is going and how it's going to eventually get into the Levant, which I'm going to highlight in part 2. Not here. I'm just going to finish this genomic study, wrap this up, lay the foundation, and then I'm going to get into the summarized reports and, summarize and put everything together in part 2. So anyway, using the F4 statistics and the QP ADM, We confirm that the EHG populations in Eastern Europe are a mixture of the Villebruna, Oberkassel, and the A&E ancestries. The populations in Eastern Europe are a mixture of the Villebruna, Oberkassel, and A&E ancestries. Now, when this A&E is creeping in, this is marking the overturn into what you would call the contemporary Europeans. It's not quite fixated, but the A&E is what's bringing in the contemporary, European genetics. If you follow the genome studies. F4 statistics also show the approximately 8.2 years ago, the Zuzuni alumni Astralo group from Karelia in western Russia, formed by 19 genomes, has comparable or lower affinity to the Villebruna ancestry than all the other EHG groups. The oldest individual revealing an indistinguishable genetic profile from the Zuzini alumni Astralo group is the 11,000-year-old Saikino individual from Samara in western Russia. Let's see what that is. Saikino. Spelled it wrong, but it'll understand what it is. Actually, the study is saying, it goes on to say it right there, that the Y chromosome is haplogroup Q and R and J. So here it is. You have the Q, R, and J in Russia. I guess that's to be expected, though, as of 11,000 years ago. So it went on to answer the question itself. We then attempted to model 250 published and newly reported hunter-gatherers dated to 14,000 to 5,000 years ago using the, I know the acronym stands for something. I can't remember what it is, but I'm going to call it the QPADM, as a mixture of the Oberkassel Sadelkino Goyet Q2 ancestries and the ancestry maximized in the Anatolian Neolithic farmers. And that Anatolian ancestry is coming from A&E, by the way, as a considerable portion of the sequenced hunter-gatherer genomes date after around 8,000 years ago, when A&F ancestry started spreading across Europe. Our results show that the contact zone and the admixture patterns between the Haplogroups and the Sadelkino ancestries changed over time. Between 14,000 and 8,000 years ago, all hunter-gatherers in Western and Central Europe carried only Oberkassel ancestry with no detectable contribution from the Sadelkino cluster. Further, North and East individuals from the Baltics, Scandinavia, the Balkans, and Ukraine already carried an Oberkassel Sadelkino admixed ancestry before 8,000 years ago. In addition, those groups also carry affinity to A&F, suggesting more complex genetic processes behind the demographic history. Moreover, two of the oldest published groups from Western Russia belonging to the Sadelkino cluster, Pesignesta, and the newly reported Menino individuals show extra affinity to the Haplogroup cluster, possibly owing to variability in the ancestry proportion during the initial formation phase of the Sadelkino ancestry profile. Using date software, we estimated the admixture between Villabruno, Abercastle, and the A&E ancestries in the in these old Seleucino clusters related individuals to around 15,000 to 13,000 years ago. Which coincides roughly with the first appearance of the Abercastle ancestry in Central Europe. This raises the possibility that the replacement by the Abercastle cluster and the formation of the Seleucino cluster might have been a result of population expansion influenced by the abrupt warming during the Balling Alarod interstadial. From around 8,000 years ago, we begin to observe admixture events with the Seleucino ancestry in Central Europe. This is first detected in the individual from Gross Frontenwald in northwestern Germany and reaches around 10% in most European hunter-gatherer individuals thereafter. Thereafter, okay, so soon after 8,000 years ago, the Seleucino ancestry was absent in eastern Spain, but it had already reached northern Iberia alongside an increase in Abercastle ancestry. Conversely, additional Abercastle ancestry is identified in eastern Europe by at least 7,500 years ago. In newly generated genomes from Menanino 1 and Saxokovo from the Upper Volga region, whereas a 1,000-year-old individual from Menanino, I did not have this genetic component. No, it's not an I, it's Menanino 1, did not have this genetic component. Considering a freshwater reservoir signal in the Upper Volga region, making the radiocarbon dates on human remains appear up to about 500 years older than their true age, there could with light eye color individuals from the Villabruno cluster, Abercastle cluster, Baltic HG and CHG groups show high frequencies of derived allele greater than 90%, which is responsible for the green or blue eye phenotype, whereas Seleucino cluster Ukraine HG hunter-gatherer and Iron Gates hunter-gatherer shows low occurrences of this allele. Instead, for the two SNPs associated with skin color, Seleucino cluster and Ukraine HG group show a higher frequency, greater than 90%, for the SLC 2485 and 29 to 61% for the SLC 45A2 of the derived alleles related to light skin color, compared with the Abercastle and the Villabruno clusters, where those alleles are almost completely absent, less than 1%. On the basis of the genetic variation of present-day Europeans, this can imply phenotypic differences between post 14,000 year ago hunter-gatherer populations across Europe, with individuals in the Abercastle cluster possibly exhibiting darker skin and lighter eyes, and individuals in the Seleucino cluster possibly lighter skin and darker eye color. So they're showing you the phenotypical transformation here. And the Labrana, which is associated with the Elmoran, is showing to be dark skin with bright eyes. I'm going to read that again. Individuals from the Villabruno cluster, Abercastle cluster, Baltic HG, and CHG groups show high frequencies of derived allele greater than 90%, which is responsible for the green and blue eye phenotype, whereas the Seleucino cluster, which would be related to the Ukraine hunter-gatherer and the Iron Gates hunter-gatherer group show low occurrence of this allele. Instead, for the two SNPs associated with skin color, cytokino cluster and Ukraine HG group show a higher frequency, greater than 90% for those depigmentation alleles. Of the derived alleles related to light skin color compared with Oberkassel and Villabruner clusters, where those alleles are almost completely absent, less than 1%. On the basis of the genetic variation of present-day Europeans, this could imply phenotypic differences between post-14,000 year ago hunter-gatherer populations across Europe, with individuals with the Oberkassel cluster possibly exhibiting darker skin and lighter eyes, and individuals in the cytokino cluster possibly lighter skin and darker eye color. Oh yeah. Now we establishing some things here. So even up into the Neolithic period, we got the majority of the skin complexion being dark, but they are developing the lighter eye color. Discussions and conclusions. So we're at the end of this. Whoever stayed to the end, hey, I appreciate you. We're going to wrap it up right here. We're getting close to the end. Discussions and conclusions. The data generated in this study enabled us to investigate genomic transformations of interactions between Eurasian hunter-gatherers and at high resolution. We provide 5 novel insights into the genomic history of hunter-gatherer populations over a time span of 30,000 years from the Upper Paleolithic to the Neolithic. First, we show that individuals associated with the Gravidian culture across Europe were not a biologically homogeneous population. Culturally, however, we see both widespread general tendencies such as weaponry and some portable art and other aspects that have a more regional character, such as mortuary practices, various originalities in lithic and hard organic materials, toolkits, and ornaments. The ancestry found in individuals associated with the preceding Evergratian culture from Central Europe gave rise to the Gravidian associated individuals from Western and Southwestern Europe. This derived ancestry, the faunal cluster, survived during the LGM and Solotrian associated individuals, possibly within the Franco-Cantabrian climatic refugium, leading to later populations associated with the Magdalenian culture, which would be Goyet Goyet Q2 cluster in El Moran. Conversely, the ancestry found in the pre-30,000-year-old Eastern Europe individuals, Konstanki cluster in the Segura group, contributed to Gravidian-associated individuals from Central and Southern Europe. The latter, without descending, retrieved in post-LGM populations from the regions. Second, the ancestry of individuals associated with the Upper Gravidian culture, which is the Villabruner cluster, which was found to genetically connect European and Near Eastern hunter-gatherers, reached Southern Europe well before the transition between the early and late Upper Gravidian, and possibly as early as the Gravidian-Upper Gravidian transition. A phylogeographic reconstruction of different lineages carry this ancestry further suggests its entry point into northeastern Italy from the Balkans, followed by a north to south expansion into the Italian peninsula alongside population decline through a sequential bottlenecks. Third, Magdalenian associated individuals not only from Iberia but also from the rest of Europe carry Epigravidian associated ancestry. Genetic analysis of Western European individuals associated with preceding Bagawillian culture might provide clues on the process that led to the formation of the Goet Q2 cluster. As inferred from the archaeological record, the spread of the Magadalian across Europe is linked to southwestern to northern and northeastern post-LGM population expansions and not to the movements from the southeastern refugium. Fourth, we extend the finding of the large-scale genetic turnover as early as 14,000 years ago in Central Western European hunter-gatherers associated with multiple technocomplexes, Fertomesser, Azilian, and other final Paleolithic groups, despite considerable technological continuity with the preceding late Magdalenian. This broadly distributed ancestry is most closely related to an Epigravidian associated individual from northwestern Italy, suggesting that its expansion into continental Europe might have started from the west and not the east side of the Alps. Moreover, the almost complete genetic replacement of the Magdalenian associated gene pool raises the hypothesis that parts of Europe were differentially populated during the abrupt climatic variation starting around 14.7 years ago with the balling Allerod warming period, creating areas where southern European populations could expand. This might also explain the genetic uniformity of the Upper Castle cluster across large parts of Western Eurasia, but genomic data from between 15 and 14,000 years ago is needed to understand the exact dynamics of this turnover. Fifth, the Upper Castle ancestry in Western and Central Europe and the Cytokino ancestry in Eastern Europe remained largely isolated for almost 6,000 years until genetic interactions were first observed around 18,000 years ago in northeastern Germany, possibly associated with cultural exchanges along the Baltics, and around 7.5 years ago in the Upper Volga region, possibly linked to the spread of pottery in the region. In conclusion, our study reveals that Western and Southwestern Europe served as a climatic refugia for the persistence of human groups during the coldest phase of the last ice age, whereas populations in the Italian peninsula and the Eastern European plain were genetically overturned, challenging the role of these regions as glacial refugia for humans. The incoming Villabrunnen's ancestry later became the most widespread hunter-gatherer ancestry across Europe. Further paleogenomic studies on upper Paleolithic individuals from the Balkans will be essential for understanding whether the southeastern Europe represents the source of the Villabrunnen's ancestry and a climatic refugium for human populations during the LGM. It says, note added in proof, a companion paper describes genome-wide data of 23,000-year-old Solution associated individual from southern Iberia that extend to the evidence of genetic continuity across the LGM in southwestern Europe. And I think that's it. That is it. I know that was kind of long-winded, but it had to be done to lay the groundwork for part 2 so I can get to the visuals and the fun stuff. I wanted to make sure I mapped this ancient European to modern European turnover event precisely, and then I'm gonna map it in part 2 with the article describing the pigmentation and eye color from these ancient Europeans to modern Europeans, and when the pale pigmentation became prevalent in Europe, which happened a lot more recent than people realize. But this needed to be established first before we got into it. I did that. And so we're gonna have some fun with part 2 and possibly part 3. And I'm gonna remove this from the screen. So I'm gonna be so annoying. And that's it, man. It's a wrap for part 1. Got that out the way, and I'm gonna work on part 2 tomorrow, and try to have that finished by tomorrow, and that's when we're gonna get into the real fun. But if anybody made it to this part, I appreciate you, and look out for part 2, and that's the end.